the SEC and the Big Ten. Let's face it, the two best conferences in all of football. I don't even think it's really close. We're going to go over 9 teams in each conference. The 9 we think have a chance to make waves. That's not to say that, Minnesota can win the Big Ten, but we're going to go over their odds because they're compelling. And some of the bottom feeders we're going to leave alone. We have to start with the SEC. We have to start with Alabama. You can find all sorts of odds on Alabama. They were 13-2 last year. They're minus 145 to win the conference. Under 11.5 is minus 150. I found it at 10.5 is minus 280 if you go over. And I don't know. It depends how you want it here. They're either minus 145 or minus 140 to win the conference. And to win that SEC West, they're minus 400. So that's a lot of numbers to try to take in. They lost 33-18 in the title game to Georgia. We remember this. Nick Saban, though, somehow has had this team appear in 6 of 8 national championship games in the playoff era. 6 of 8. It's insane. The last 3 years, either first or second in the country and the SEC in recruiting. This year, they're second. They'll be the first team in college history to return a Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, who had 4,800 plus yards passing, and the Nagurski Award winner, linebacker Will Anderson from the previous season. They get Brian Robinson at running back. Jahmyr Gibbs, they took over from Georgia Tech. They play that transfer portal game really good. They lose Jamison Williams, John Mechie, Evan Neal. They had a guy transfer, Ricks, a quarterback. They returned 7 on defense, which led the nation in sacks. They need a little help on the O-line, but the schedule is very favorable. I say they're going to run the table. They're at Texas. Sorry, Scott the Grizz. They'll get a win that. There, they win at Tennessee. They'll be substantial favorites. There's no Georgia this year. There's no LSU. There's no Auburn on the schedule. LSU and Auburn are very average. They're on the schedule. 12-0. I like them going over 11.5. Brother Bry, what do you have for Alabama? It's tough to bet with these numbers.
Yeah, these numbers are tough for these top teams. But I would bet them to have an undefeated season. I would, but I might put a ton on the over. I know you had laying like minus 280 or minus 275 on the over 10.5. I might put a ton on that because, you could get tripped up in one game, but they're not getting tripped up in 2. I'd prefer that much more. I think the over 10.5 versus the SEC West at minus 400. I feel like. Mm-hmm. But they're, like you said, their schedule is pretty weak for Bama. Like you said, they're going to beat up on Texas. They're going to get revenge versus Texas A&M at home this year. The tough one maybe will be at Arkansas. That could be tough, but this team is going to be loaded. This reminds me of the teams of the past. You probably have maybe the 2 best players in the country, like you said, in Bryce Young and Will Anderson. They maybe brought in the best running back in the country, Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. I would say last year, there's question marks on their offensive line, which will probably be a little bit better overall. Wide receivers, they lost a bunch, but they got that kid Burton from Georgia. They have that young kid Brooks, who was pretty good in the playoffs last year. He made some big catches, and I think he was the top receiver coming out of high school 2 years ago. So, they're always going to replenish. They always do with these receivers. You have the kid Latua at tight end. So I love this team. I think they're going to be awesome. I know you're laying a heavy thing on minus 280 to go over 10.5, but I do not see this team losing 2 games at all.
Yeah, they're home versus Texas A&M, so they lost that game, right? So revenge on their mind. At Tennessee, everybody loves Tennessee. We're going to get to all these teams later. So that's the tough one. I mean, they're not going to lose to LSU. Team's bad. They're not going to lose to Auburn anymore. Ole Miss. I think you're over 10.5. Like you said, though, minus 280 is rough hit if you lose, but I don't think they're losing twice. I don't think they're losing at all. 12-0. All right, so we're both going over. Georgia, also 11.5. I saw under is minus 180. They're plus 155 or plus 160 in that range to win the conference. FanDuel has them over 10.5 at minus 250. The under is plus 210 to win the SEC East. They're minus 550. Obviously, these are going to be monster numbers. So they're plus 155 to win the conference. Alabama, a minus 140, minus 145 to win the conference. Kirby Smarty did it. He's 66-15 since he took over. He won this team a title last year. They went 14-1. Although a team has not repeated as champ in the SEC in a decade, or actually has repeated as champ overall. Bama did it 2011, 2012. It seems like everybody on this team got drafted, Harry. Really,
Yeah, really.
Whatever. So they lose JT Daniels, Zamir White's gone, Jermaine Burton, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Lewis Sign.
Mhm.
The top 5 recruiting class in the country for the 6th straight year. So that helps. You got Stetson Bennett taking snaps. He was the first walk-on to lead the team to a title. He's good, but we're reminded every time we see him, he's not a pro. So I don't know. We'll see how much this indoors. No Zamir White, no George Pickens. If 3 of their top 4 pass catchers do return, got that Brock Bowers at 13 touchdowns. 7 of their 11 starters on defense, as we mentioned, are gone. DC is gone. Dan Lanning, he's at Oregon now. So that's a fun game. They start September 3rd against them. Aside from that first half of the schedule is easy. I don't think they'd run the table. There's no room for error. After the bye, they have Florida, Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. I think they're losing 1 or 2. I could see them losing at Kentucky. I like under 11.5, even under 10.5 if you can get it, Harry. You agree with me on Georgia under.
Yeah, you guys mentioned Burton's going to Alabama, the rival. It's tough to repeat. I like the under 2, and I don't think it's got tons of good fortune for Bennett and Kirby Smart last year. Maybe not so much this year. Sal, you mentioned plenty of players to the NFL. Top 2 running backs from last year squad gone. You mentioned Zamir White. He's with Bryant's Raiders. James Cook is in Buffalo. Like you mentioned, Burton again gone. And you said they play Oregon start the season. That could be a toughie. You mentioned we were also going to talk about Tennessee. I'm kind of all in on this Tennessee Vols team. I think they can upset Georgia when they play them at Kentucky, another team that's very good. Had a great season last year. That could be a tough game at Mississippi State. Florida might be on the rise here with new coaching staff and everything in Florida. I'm going to go under with Georgia as well, guys.
It's just tough for this defense to be as good as they were last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they don't have to be, but for God's sakes, and the defensive coordinator going to Oregon, you're right. Huge game that they could lose, believe it or not. I know they're going to be favored, but you got to look at it that way. All right, Texas A&M, 8.5 is the over-under, minus 165 on the over, under plus 140. They're 18-1 to win the conference. They were 8-4 last year. Jimbo Fisher, they were solid. They beat Bama, but then lost 2 of the last 3. They're going to need to replace Zach Calzada, the quarterback, Isaiah Spiller, the running back, and their top receiver, Jalen Wittermeyer. But number 1 recruiting class in the nation. Number 1. 2022 class includes 7 5-star signees, the most ever in one class. 17 of the top 100 players. Quarterback-wise, it's going to be Haynes King or Max Johnson from LSU or Connor Wegman. Running back is Devin Aknang, who led the Power 5 with 7 yards per carry last year. He's pretty good. He has to replace Isaiah Spiller. And the wide receiver, Aeneas Smith, is currently suspended following like a DWI, I think, from last in the offseason. Weapons, pot charges, a lot going, but most touchdowns of any returning SEC player. He had 17 over the last 2 seasons. He'll be back eventually. I like their schedule. At Alabama, again, I said it's a payback beatdown probably, but no Kentucky, no Georgia. They're home versus Florida. Parlay Kid 9-3, outside shot at 10-2 for Jimbo Fisher. I go over.
I agree with you here, so I know we're laying a lot here at minus 165 for the 8.5. It's a little bit of a strange team last year, right? 8 wins, beat Bama, but had some terrible losses too against some unranked teams.
Yep.
But like you're saying, in terms of their quarterback situation is a bit unsettled right now, but I think they're going to get a good one out of it regardless. You have Max Johnson, the LSU transfer, who I threw 27 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions last year with a very mediocre LSU offense, or Haynes King, who can get the job done too. So I think they're going to come out with a good one. Like you said, we know how Saban feels about this number 1 recruiting class coming in for Texas A&M. 7 5-star recruits. What a haul for Fisher. Yes, there's some bad blood. I do expect them to get pounded by Bama in Bama.
Right.
But Sam Houston, App State, UMass on their schedule. That's 3 wins right there. Their defense gave up 15 or less points in 7 games last year. And they return about half their starters there on defense. 11 starters returning overall. Let's take the over. This team is on the rise, Texas A&M. Let's go over 8.5 wins.
I like it. It might be my best SEC bet for over-unders. Haynes King broke his leg. He was 2-0. Yeah, like you said, it's the three-headed race there. But he was 2-0 before he broke his leg. And now comeback. Looks like he's going to start, at least right here in the preseason, a couple weeks before the season. So it looks that way. All right, now you have Florida. They're over-under a 7. They're 45-1. 45-1 odds to win the SEC. That ain't happening. They were 6-6 last year. Then they lost the bowl game, I believe. FanDuel has it over 7 is -115. To win the East, they're 16-1. They have no Dan Mullen. Billy Napier, first season from Louisiana Lafayette. His team ruled the Sun Belt, but now they're playing with the big boys. This Florida team was 2-6 in conference. They didn't have a single all SEC selection last year. It's crazy. So now I'm going to mention names that they're losing. Emory Jones, who was, very frustrating to watch. Damian Pierce, the running back, he lit it up, right? He was one of the bright spots this weekend in the preseason, right? For Houston. They like that. They lost Jacob Copeland, the wide receiver. The cornerback, Elam, was drafted in the first round. They fell from the number 1 passing offense in 2020 to 46th after losing Trask and Pitts and Kadarius Toney. Anthony Richardson, 9 touchdowns, 6 turnovers. That's going to be their guy taking snaps. Defensively, they returned 7 starters, but why? I mean, they gave up 52 to Samford, right? Didn't they give up that many? I think that was 52. They do have some notable 5-star recruits. Brenton Cox, Jervin Dexter, Jason Marshall at cornerback. But, Utah, Kentucky, at Tennessee, that's 3 of the first 4 weeks. They have Georgia and at A&M in the second half. They're middle of the pack. There are too many unknowns about this team. I'm going 6-6 for Florida, and that puts it under. I think, Brian, you agree with me.
Yeah, I like the under too. Now, I will say I do really like the hire of Billy Napier. You know, for Louisiana Lafayette, he was outstanding. They only lost 2 games in the last 2 years. But it's possible it's going to take a few years, right, to get them back to the top of this conference. A few things to like, a lot of people do like Anthony Richardson, although he kind of a turnover machine last year. And I will say they do have 7 games at home, 1 on neutral site. So only really like four road games. And they do have a couple of gimmies. But, you get Utah to start right out of the gate, who I think Utah is going to be really good. I like them. And
we're going to know right away, right? For both of those teams.
You're going to know right away. But I do really like Utah to start. And you get Kentucky and Tennessee in 2 of the next 3, which I think are going to be really tough. You have A&M, Georgia, which are going to be losses. So LSU, South Carolina, those are going to be tough games. So, this team going 6-7 last year, I think at most they could get to 7-5, but I would lean definitely on the under for them.
Yeah, the defense was just too bad. Too much to recoup there. I mean, 11th in the conference. All right, let's move on now. Tennessee. This is the darling pick, Harry. I know you're going to go over and we'll talk about it, but everybody loves this team. They're over on their 7.5. The over on the 7.5 is -170. They're 50-1 to win the SEC. They were 7-6 last year after the bowl game. To win the East Division they're 14-1. You got Josh Heupel, 7-6. Like I said, they were exciting to watch. I always seem to have a bet on them. And they went from 3 wins in 2020 to 7. So that's pretty good. Returning from 2021 leaders in passing, Hendon Hooker. I know you love him, Harry. Jabari Small, the running back, and Cedric Tillman at receiver. Those are the leading guys anyway. They need better balance, though. Number 2 offensively, number 12 defensively. Like I said, 8 starters returning on offense. No Velus Jones. He went to the Bears, right, as wide receiver. But this Hooker, incredible numbers, 34 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Now, the problem was their pass defense was last in the SEC. So they have a bunch of 45, 42 games in there. Their recruiting was okay, 8th in the conference, 17th in the nation. They have Bama, they have Kentucky, they're at Georgia. They have a weird game at Pitt. I'll give them the over, but I don't love it as much as everyone else. I'm going to say 8-4. Harry, what do you have them winning 10 games?
I do. Listen, me and the boys called our buddy Brad, who's a huge Tennessee fan. I told him I'm all in on the Vols this year. I think Hendon Hooker is a sleeper Heisman pick. Sal, you mentioned he had like 34 touchdowns, 2 picks last year, over almost 3,000 yards. The trio of Hooker, Small, and Tillman are back. I think this team, they have tremendous speed, top 10 scoring offense, first time since 1995. Heupel's terrific, and he was terrific in his first year in Knoxville. And you mentioned a little bit of their schedule, Sal. their non-conference schedule. They have Ball State, they have Akron, and they have Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh was tremendous last year, but their offensive coordinator is gone, and Kenny Pickett is gone. So new revamping of Pittsburgh. So that's a win for Tennessee too. I think they can win 9-10 games. Yeah. And again, I think they can upset. I think they can upset Georgia.
Interesting. You know, it's weird because their last win over a top 10 team came in 2006. They have 39 straight losses. So they have to win the big game. They could beat up on the scrub teams for sure. And their last SEC title came in 1998. Been a long, long time since Peyton Manning patrolled the sideline there. All right, Ole Miss, 7.5, 50-1 odds to win the SEC. They were 10-3 last year, including the bowl game. FanDuel has it 7.5 is over minus 140. Under is plus 120 to win that West division. They're 16-1. This is Lane Kiffin's team, 6-2 in conference. Now they're going to have to replace Matt Corral. So all these numbers I'm going to give you are misleading because it was all Matt Corral and Jerrion Ely and Dontario Drummond. I mean, this made up the offense. They were 10th in recruiting in the conference, but the number 2 transfer class in the country this offseason. This is becoming big. They got Jackson Dart, the USC quarterback, running back Zach Evans from TCU, and Ulysses Bentley from SMU. The number 1 total offense, again, could a lot have been Matt Corral for sure. But both seasons, the number 1 total offense under Lane Kiffin, that's pretty good. Dart, the USC transfer there, was 0-3 with them. He had a torn meniscus. He's going to compete with Luke Altmaier. Their scoring defense wasn't bad. It went from 117th, which is the worst in the SEC, obviously, 117th overall to 51st overall and 8th in the SEC. They added Troy Brown, 3-time All-MAC at Central Michigan. Hasheem Young, he's a safety. So they did well in the transfer portal. Kentucky, Bama, at A&M. They have a weird game at Georgia Tech early. I think they moved back a little bit, Parlay Kid. I'm going under. I think you're going over. I'm going 7-5 with Lane Kiffin's team. Too many good teams in this conference. 7-5 for Ole Miss.
Yeah, I debated that one too, Sal. I'm a fan of Lane Kiffin, though. I believe in Lane Kiffin. I think he can plug pieces in an offense and make it work. Like you said, you got to debate now. What's more important, getting a top transfer class in or a top recruiting class coming in as freshmen? I think for an immediate fix, you're talking about these transfer classes, and they had a great one. Second in the country. That's rated at least second in the country. They won 10 last year for the first time. Wait, Eli never won 10? Oh, geez, I didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
QB Jackson Dart. So big-time prospect coming out of high school.
Yep.
Really didn't get it done at USC, but he's healthy now. He could be just everybody's good. He could be as Corral was. And don't sleep on this running back transfer they got from TCU named Zach Evans. Averaged 7 yards a carry for TCU last year and a pretty good sample size. He's going to be pretty big. Sal, Troy, Central Arkansas, Tulsa, at Georgia Tech, home versus Kentucky, at Vandy. This team could be 6-0 to start the season, making this 7.5 look real good. I think they at least start 5-1 with that schedule right there. Lane Kiffin, good coach, 7-0 at home last year. They'll win their home games. I'm taking the over 7.5.
All right. Yeah, this is the one I'm shakiest on. I really am with Ole Miss. I don't know why. I mean, Lane Kiffin's a neighbor. Scott the Grizz, didn't you see his wife at Ralph's or something in the shopping center? Did I get that right? Or am I making that up? He doesn't want to say anything. All right. Thanks for that.
He knows exactly who she looks
Scott,
like.
am I making that up? What happened?
Lane Kiffin's wife. No.
Yeah. No?
No.
Oh, my God.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Who'd you say? Whose wife did you say?
I don't remember this.
Really? I'm
was
going
it
nuts
Liner's
here.
wife,
I'm losing my
Sal,
mind.
maybe?
No, it wasn't.
Well, are you talking about Nick? Well, there was reports Nick Saban's wife was seen around Austin back before Sarkisian got.
No, you saw someone, and I think you tried to grab her ass or something.
Oh,
no,
good Lord, sir.
All right, forget it. All
That was
right,
Urban Meyer.
All right, we'll move on to Kentucky. Their over-under is 8. 55-1 odds to win the SEC. They were 10-3 last year. See, this is one of the numbers where like 10-win team is going to win 8. I'm going to go over. FanDuel actually has it at 7.5, minus 125 to the over, and 40-1 to win the conference. 12 to win, 1 to win the East Division. This is Mark Stoops' team. Came in second in the SEC East behind Georgia last year. He's going to have to replace 13 of 22 starters from last year. 13th best recruiting class in the country. The biggest losses of the wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson. That's the Giant, right? Giants, hopeful. You got to get that. And Josh Pascal on defense, defensive. And quarterback Will Levis, 33 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions. He had 14 turnovers, though, which were tied for the most in the SEC, but 9 rushing touchdowns, second most out of SEC quarterbacks. Running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., Tavion Robinson, those are going to be the guys. Now, they got the former 49ers quarterback coach, Rich Scangarello, is the offensive coordinator. So things are looking up, I think, for that offense. The line is going to have to replace both starting tackles, including an all-SEC center, Luke Fortner. They had an average D in the SEC, top 25 in football 3 of the last 4 seasons. They lost Pascal, as I mentioned. Jock Jones led the team with 85 tackles last season. J.J. Weaver's back. He led the team with 6 sacks last season. Looking at their schedule, out of conference, it's Louisville, it's Northern Illinois, it's Youngstown, Ohio U, Miami, Ohio. If they don't get tripped up there, then they got Georgia, Tennessee, and at Florida. I'm going to be boring here, and I'm going to say exactly 8-4. So if the over-under you're looking at is an 8, stay away. If you can get FanDuel over 7.5 at a price, take it there. Harry, you like it over also.
Yeah, I gave out Kentucky last year over, and it went way over. You told me Clay Travis loved the under, and I said that was locked. So that worked out nice.
What a
won that
surprise.
one over. Yeah, what a surprise. The one that won easy, it's how you mentioned Will Levis, the quarterback. He can beat you with his arm and his legs. 9 rushing touchdowns, you said. And the running back, Chris Rodriguez, had over 1,400 yards rushing last year. He's back. Weak non-conference schedule. The toughest team they play non-conference-wise, like you mentioned, was Louisville, and they beat them by 31 last year in that rivalry that started. They finally got over the hump. They beat Florida last year, so that they've got that in their back pocket. And they don't play LSU, who's average team, but still having to play LSU on the road could be tough. They don't have to play the Tigers, and they don't have to play Alabama.
So, Harry, you must have like Ole Miss under or something, because if you have Tennessee and Kentucky over, I mean, all these like teams are around 7.5, 8, right? I mean, who's gonna falter here?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I just like, I'm on Tennessee, I'm on Kentucky this year, and I'm big. Tennessee could be one of these teams that just blows you away. I'm just telling you, that's my team this year.
I know.
Iowa
A lot
State
of
was my team
firepower.
last year. Iowa State was the team last year.
Yeah, that's true.
Tennessee is my team this year.
They blew us away too. Wait a minute. Nobody looked that up. Iowa State was awful from the whistle. Arkansas, 7.5 wins, 60-1 to win the conference. They were 9-4 last year. FanDuel has it at 7, minus 115 on the over, and 16-1 to win the division. This is Sam Pittman's team. Like I said, he went 9-4. He gave the fans a lot to be excited for. They finished ranked in the AP poll for the first time since 2011. They won 5 of their last 6. The only loss, I believe, was a 1-score game against Alabama. Quarterback KJ Jefferson, 27 total touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Pretty good. Second most rushing yards, 664 among SEC quarterbacks. They lose Traylon Burks. He went to Tennessee, right? Titans. They lose Traylon Smith. They lost a lot of Traylons. Traylon Smith went to TCU. They have 4 different players, though, rush for 500 yards last year. So they kind of do it by committee. Defensively, they're in the middle of the pack, except for our guy, Bumper Poole, who's dynamite. Back-to-back all-SEC selections. They had the 3rd most tackles in the conference last year with 125. They lost 2 guys in the secondary to LSU. I'm looking at their schedules. A tough non-conference games against Cincinnati, BYU, and Liberty. And then conference games against A&M, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and Ole Miss. I'm sorry, Bumper. I'm going under. Feels like 7-5, 6-6. I know, but Brother Bry, bail us out here, because Bumper's going to be mad at us. But I just like him right around even, or 7-5.
Yeah, well, we got to go with Bumper's team here. I mean, I think this is one of the few teams we have to root for, right, on the season. I do like this Arkansas team. Sam Pittman's done a great job with this group. They had the huge leap last year to 9-4. I would say last year they had 2 bad games, right? They had a bad game against Georgia. They had a bad game against Auburn. But, they beat A&M last year. Super exciting games with Ole Miss and Bama that they could have technically won. You bring back one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Well, some think he's one of the better quarterbacks in KJ Jefferson. Most of their offensive line is back. Kendall Browers is maybe the best offensive coordinator in the conference. Now, I will say kudos to Arkansas for having such a tough non-conference schedule. Like you said, Cincy right out of the gate's tough. BYU could be really good, and Liberty is all, Liberty's been up and coming team. But I think if they win that first game against Cincinnati, they could easily get off to a 3-0 start. I think it's an 8-4 team, maybe 7-5 for a push, but I don't see them regressing necessarily to 6-6. So I think this is a team we root for. 7-5, 8-4. But
we're gonna root
like
for them anyway. You're right.
I'm over.
Just trying to be practical.
I know. I hear you.
They had exciting games all last year, right? It just seemed like a lot of goal line stances, a lot of everything, right? Third, not great recruiting. Didn't help Bumper a little bit. They're 13th in the conference there, recruiting 28th nationally, and they lost like 6 guys to the transfer portal. This transfer portal, you really have to stay on top of it.
That's
because
crazy.
It just changes the whole dynamic of everything. All right, last team we're going to go over here, LSU. Their over-under is 7. Unbelievable. 6-7 last year. Their over-under on FanDuel, 6.5 minus 140. 100 to 1 to win the conference. Can you believe this? This team was dynamite just a few years ago. Now 100 to 1 to win the West is 40 to 1. And Spaghetti, good news. Brian Kelly is here. All his super white hype videos. He's not trying to be super white, but Spaghetti, you wish Brian Kelly well?
I do not wish him well, and every time he's spoken publicly, he's made a fool of himself. No one, the recent one too. I don't know if you guys saw, like when he's like yelling at the media for like not responding hello to him. Like the guy is just he's lost his mind. I hope LSU wins 2 games.
Wow, Spaghetti's going under.
Damn.
Well, bad news. Good news. He's never won a New Year's 6 game or a BCS bowl game. He's 0-5. He's not going to win one this year because he's not going to get there. But each of the 3 previous coaches hired by LSU led the school to a national title. Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron. So, but like you said, they had their first losing season in 22 years last year. New coordinators, both sides of the ball for the second straight season. Biggest losses, Max Johnson at quarterback, Tyrion Davis-Price at running back. They had 4 starting offensive linemen are going to be out. They lose Damon Clark as a linebacker. Stingley was drafted, right? First rounder, cornerback, another cornerback, Eli Ricks. They added Jaden Daniels, the ASU quarterback. They have a dozen transfer portal ads. They really went crazy. Their defense was 10th in the SEC. It seemed worse. It was even worse the year before, I think. They added a bunch, like I said, this transfer portal, they're going nuts. They added an Oklahoma kid, 7 Banks from Ohio State. They kick things off with FSU. Tennessee's on the schedule, Bama at A&M, at Arkansas. I could see a 5-7 in their future. I don't know about 2 wins, Spaghetti. I see no bowls and 5-7 for LSU. Parlay Kid, you see over 6.5. Interesting.
I'm rolling with these overs here, which I don't love the fact that it just keeps popping over for me.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is LSU was terrible last year, Sal, and they won 6 games. And they were bad, right? Brian Kelly makes up for at least 1, if not 2 games right there with this team. In my book, they had the number 3 transfer class come in here, including their possible quarterback in Jaden Daniels and Harry. You know he was pretty good with ASU. They eventually became weren't a great team, but there was some nights that he was outstanding for that club. He's a dual threat, which is going to be great for Brian Kelly. Maybe a better quarterback than he ever had at Notre Dame. I hate to say it, but he might have a guy here that's better than anybody ever coached at Notre Dame. They have a running back right now named John Emery, who was a 5-star recruit. He was ineligible last year, but he's back this year. Big-time running back. Sal, wide receiver, Kayshon Boutte, maybe one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in the country. Their first 4, Sal, they have a neutral site game against Florida State. I think they win that. Southern at home versus Southern, home versus Mississippi State, home versus New Mexico. 4-0 start. This team's going over 6.5 wins. Take it, minus 140.
Oh, no, Spaghetti. That's no good for you, right? You don't want 4-0. Is Notre Dame even going to be 4-0?
No, they will
probably not. They have Ohio State right off the bat. So
if memory serves me right, though, weren't you big on LSU last year? At least
Yes,
week 1.
I was.
Right? Yeah.
I was.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm trying to look that up because obviously they have odds out on
They
that.
were my Iowa State last year.
Daniels in the right system might fit and it might work here, But a lot of at the end of the season and more towards the middle part to the end of the season last year at ASU, Daniels was kind of a disappointment. Really couldn't get the ball going, couldn't pass it. He could run a bit.
They got terrible coaching at ASU. That's why too.
Okay. All right.
They do.
Let me find this what that line, because I'm curious what the line is there for the LSU. All right. LSU is a 3.5 point favorite of Florida State. All right.
Yep.
That's doable. All right. And so this is going to be unsatisfying, but we're going to pick winners of the SEC. Alabama is minus 145. And I don't know. If I have them going undefeated, I have to think they're going to win the SEC, right? And everybody's in step, right? Harry, Bama, 45, Parlay Kid.
Look,
yeah.
I mean,
Loaded.
Saban's pissed, and he didn't like Kirby Smart and Georgia beating them. He's pissed at Jimbo Fisher. He's probably got the Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young again. Very possibly he could win back-to-back. So, sure, I'm on Alabama, unfortunately.
The one thing, Parlay Kid, is they don't play Georgia in the regular season. So I don't know who this helps. This is we could see that it's just one team making it from the SEC, which would be odd to our eyeballs at this point.
Which would be nice, though, in a way, too.
Yeah, sure.
So.
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll check that out. Brian, you have to add, right? You like Bama, but you like Kentucky to win the East, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to love Bama. I mean, the one thing is, again, obviously an injury to Young changes everything. So you have to be worried about that a little bit. But yeah, I was looking at some of the odds, right? They have SEC East division winners, SEC West division winners. I think you got to look to the East to find any type of value. So I thought, and I know Kentucky lost a bunch of players, but I think, having one of the best QBs in college football, Stoops was really good for them, and they've improved so much. I do think they pose somewhat of a threat, and I think they're what, 12-1? I have to look this up quick, but I think I have them at 12-1 to win the. Yeah, they're 12-1 to win the East. So I thought that was. Why not? I thought that was pretty good. Year. A couple of those teams, like Harry said, Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe it makes sense to take a look at them for the East, but Georgia's still going to be so good. I mean, it's hard to say.
All right. Well, maybe we'll disagree on the Big Ten, although I don't think we will. Well, let's check it out. We're going to go over 9 teams in the Big Ten in just a minute, but let's take a quick break. All right. We just went over the SEC. We're back with the Big Ten, and who's on top? Well, it's Ohio State. Even though they stumbled last year, 10.5 is the over/under, minus 250 if you like the over. 11.5 you can go, and then go under minus 160. It's very confusing. They're minus 215 to win the conference. They were 11-2 last year. All said and done, FanDuel has the over at 11 and minus 130. Ryan Day, 34-4. This was the first time last year that they didn't win the Big Ten since 2016, but they're 29-1 in the last 30 games versus Big Ten opponents. The only loss obviously came to Michigan last year. First in scoring offense last year, 9th in scoring defense. That was what's troublesome. CJ Stroud back, Trayvon Henderson, Jackson Smith-Njigba. And then on defense, Zach Harrison, cornerback Denzel Burke, Ronnie Hickman. Biggest losses, though, Chris Olave, wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver, Patet Ferrer, the tackle, Haskell Garrett, the defensive tackle. But they have the best recruiting class, no surprise, in the Big Ten, 4th best in the nation. What could you say about Stroud? He broke Ohio State's single-season record for passing yards, about 370 a game. Very efficient, 72%. Henderson, running back, like I said, 19 touchdowns last year. Smith-Njigba led the Big Ten and set Ohio State singles. I mean, their receivers are ridiculous, right? So even if they lose the top two to the draft, the first rounders, this guy had 1,600 receiving yards last season. The defense, like I said, lost Haskell Garrett, Tyreek Smith, Sevyn Banks. They were the worst red zone defense. That was the problem in the Big Ten. They were 124th in all of FBS. Their pass defense was 97th. It wasn't a team you were used to. They do have 5-star players on defense. Zach Harrison, Jack Sawyer. I'm looking at their schedule. Notre Dame, there it is, Spaghetti, September 3rd. Boom or bust. Wisconsin, September 24th. So 2 tough ones in the first 3 or 4 weeks. Then they're at Michigan State. They're at Penn State. They end in the Horseshoe versus Michigan. I think the question is, do they lose 0, 1, or 2 games? I think those are our options. And I'm going to say they lose once. And it might be to someone weird, like not weird, but at Michigan State. Watch out for that game. I think that's their loss. I would go under 11.5. Bri, you're taking it a step further. You think they lose 2 games at least. You're going under 11.
Yeah, I'm going to go under 11. It's, because I feel like this is probably a push here. I mean, I do think probably 11-1 makes sense. Like you were saying, Stroud, I mean, he was phenomenal. His accuracy was off the charts last year, especially late in the season. But, offensively, they're going to be awesome, right? Between Stroud and Jigba, Henderson, they're going to miss Olave and Wilson. But you saw in that Utah game, right? Like Marvin Harrison Jr. was a phenomenal.
Right.
And Jigba had one of the best receiving games ever, right? Which is amazing to think for all these good Ohio State wide receivers. And like you said, the difference is going to be their defense is going to be the question mark for them, right? That was like the first year they were kind of bad, below average.
They got a new defensive coordinator, right? Kerry Coombs is out.
Right. Yep. New defensive coordinator. So, if this team gets back to being really good defensively like they've been in the past, they could go undefeated. But when you have, I do think they beat Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame always struggles with these elite teams. But if you have Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa, Penn State, Michigan, you probably get tripped up once there, right? They're going to have one or two close games with those teams. So I think 11-1 is probably where they're going to be. But I'm going to say because of those 6 games that, the more likelihood is that they trip up twice versus none. So I'm going to go under 11.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good bet. A lot of tough games on the schedule, but it's sad that in terms of who's going to win the conference, all you really look at is, all right, who's playing Ohio State, Michigan? Which one of them is Ohio State for the most part? Oh my God, they're at home and they owe them a beating. Yeah, so that doesn't look good for Michigan, whose over under is 9.5. They're 6-1, 6-1 to win this conference. 12-2 last year. FanDuel has it 9.5. Over is the -125. Harbaugh, 61-24 record overall. He stole that Big Ten title from Ohio State. We beat them in the regular season and then beat up on Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. They snapped that 8-game losing streak against Ohio State, 15-point win. They lost to eventual champ Georgia 34-11 in the Orange Bowl. These teams are just too good. They replaced both coordinators this offseason. Off after losing Josh Gaddis to Miami, and Mike McDonald went to the Ravens, I believe. Hassan Haskins is gone. Aiden Hutchinson's gone. David Ajobu is gone. Josh Ross, Daxton Hill. So those are going to be tough to replace. They had the number 1 rushing offense in the Big Ten, 214 yards a game. But again, Haskins is gone. They have Blake Corum replacing him. He had over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 11 touchdowns. Quarterback-wise, Cade McNamara, all Big Ten last year, 16 total touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's 12-3 as a starting quarterback. And then they recruited J.J. McCarthy, the highest graded recruit of the Jim Harbaugh era, 5 stars, 7 total touchdowns, 2 interceptions as a true freshman last year. So you got to replace Haskins. You have to improve from the number 95 scoring defense in college football. And they did that. They went to number 8 in 2021. They're going to need to replace 7 of the 11 starters, including Hutchinson and Jobo. I said top 10 and top 2 in the Big Ten in sacks. They did the 3rd best job recruiting in the conference, but it's still a tall order. They have no true test really until October 1st at Iowa, Penn State, Michigan State, at Ohio State. I see it as 9-3. 9-3 gets you under. So, Harry, you disagree with me?
Yeah, I'm going to go over. Look, Harbaugh could have left. He could have left for the Vikings. He decided to stay, signed that big contract. You mentioned McNamara backs out. Great game manager. Also, McCarthy comes in at times. Played very well last year when he needed to fill in. You mentioned Haskins is gone. He's with the Titans. Yeah, but Corum, 1,100 yards, fills in, very fast running back. He'll fit in nicely. And the schedule, 8 home games. And it really couldn't get any easier. The non-conference is Colorado State, Hawaii, and possibly the worst team in all college football with UConn. And then they have Maryland, Penn State, who's a bit down, Michigan State, revenge game there, who tripped them up last year, Nebraska and Illinois. I'm going to go over here. I think they get 10. I think they may get 11.
Wow. 11. All right.
They finally got over the hump, taking out Ohio State, and I think Ohio State's got some holes in them, and I think Michigan go into the horseshoe and maybe beat them again.
Well, they're going to have to for your pick, and I could tell it in your voice. You're going with them to repeat as Big Ten champions. Wisconsin, I don't know what we do with this team. FanDuel has the over-under at 9, plus 110 on the over side. You could find 8.5s out there. They're 11-1 to win the conference. They were 9-4 last year. They're plus 170 to win the West. Paul Chryst, he could be on the hot seat. Back-to-back unranked finishes for the first time since 2002, 2003. Although they did win 8 of the last 9. They shook up the coaching staff this year. New offensive coordinator Bobby Ingram. Got a new offensive line coach, tight end coach. They have the fewest returning starters in the Big Ten. I think 8. They've committed the most turnovers in the Big Ten. They were a sloppy team. It wasn't really Wisconsin football, but the quarterbacks are just brutal every year. They just are, Parlay Kid. Really. Graham Mertz, 150 passing yards a game. I know that's not their thing, but 10 passes, 11 interceptions. You basically need in a lot of these games, and believe me, I have them on moneyline parlays all the time. You need these guys to make like 3 good throws a game, and they don't do it. He had 15 turnovers, which is the most committed by any player in the Power 5. Braylon Allen had 1,268 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns as a true freshman. He'll be good. They're going to need to replace top 3 receivers, and including a 2-time all Big Ten tight end, Jake Ferguson. Of course, they have a Big Ten, all Big Ten tight end, Jake Ferguson. They'll replace him with another country farm boy right there. They had the number 1 defense in the Big Ten. I mean, it's the same team every year. Top 10 scoring defense in 6 of the last 7 seasons. They lose 8 of 11 starters. They added cornerbacks Jay Shaw as a 2021 All Pac-12 selection at UCLA, and Cedric Dort. He started 25 games at Kentucky. They're at Ohio State. They're at Michigan State. They're at Iowa. They have a weak non-conference. Weak enough to give me 9-3 when it all shakes out. I'm not that excited about it. I think Paul Chryst gets it done, kind of 9-3. Wisconsin, boring team. Exactly what you're looking for there. And a Wisconsin team. Parlay Kid, you think 8-4 or worse?
Yeah, look, it's under 9, right? So if this number was 9.5, I'd love the under, and if it was 8.5, I'd probably love the over. I think the worst case, I get a push out of this here on this bet. So, like you said, they returned the least starters in the Big Ten, 3 on the defensive side, which is always their strong suit, 5 on the offensive side. We know they have a great running game. Braylon Allen, once they inserted him in the lineup last year, he helped their offense greatly. But the bottom line is they need to bet more passing. Mertz is just not the guy who's going to get it done here, especially when they're already losing their 3 top receivers. The 3 top pass catchers are gone.
Yep.
Where is their passing game going to come from? So no matter how good Braylon Allen is, this offense is going to struggle. The defense is turning over a little bit because they only returning 3 starters. Sal, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, at Iowa, could be 3 losses, 9 wins maximum. They lose something somewhere else in there. Let's take the under 9 here at -130.
Yeah, I guess, I'm finding an 8.5 and going over. I'm not, I wouldn't go over 9. That's for damn sure. So I think it's either 9-3 or 8-4 somewhere. All right, Penn State, another team. They're 8.5 also, although FanDuel has them at 8 at -145. They were 7-6 last year after the bowl game, 16-1 to win the conference. James Franklin's team's 11-11 over the last 2 years. I'd say he's another one on the hot seat, except he got a 10-year extension last year, so I don't know where that leaves them. They were 5-0. This is amazing to me because I don't love him. Sean Clifford was 5-0, and then they were 2-6 following his injury. They lose Noah Cain, the running back. They lose Jahan Dotson. Their offensive line struggled. They had the 2nd worst rushing offense and most sacks allowed in the Big Ten last year. I mentioned Clifford, 21-12 in 3 seasons as a starter. It just doesn't seem like it. 68 touchdowns, 22 interceptions. They also have Drew Aller. He's Penn State's first 5-star quarterback. Signs a number 4 quarterback in the 2022 class. First top 5-star since Christian Hackenberg on this team. Kayvon Lee led Penn State in rushing each of the last 2 seasons. 438 yards and 530 yards. I mean, that's pathetic. That's their leading rusher, 438 and 530 in the last 2 years. The defense tied for 2nd in the Big Ten. They hired Manny Diaz, the former Miami head coach, as defensive coordinator after Brent Pry left to head coach Virginia Tech. They're going to need to replace 7 starters. They got a good pass rusher. Adisa Isaac is back after missing last season with a torn Achilles. We'll learn a lot in that first game at Purdue. That's a fun one. And then they're at Auburn, they're at Michigan, they have Ohio State, they have Michigan State. It feels like 8-4. I can't get too excited about this offense to go out and win 9 games. So I'm going to say 8 games right there. So it's a push on FanDuel. If you could find 8.5, go under. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go under 8 or 8.5. If you go under 8, it's plus 125 on FanDuel. But this team's been underperforming for the last 2 years. I do know they have good, their recruiting ranks are very high for this year, but that's not going to necessarily help them this year. I just don't think this team necessarily wins 9 games, right? Ohio State and likely Michigan are losses. Now you can really only trip up one more time. That almost means you have to beat, you almost have to win in Purdue. You almost have to win in Auburn. And then you still get Michigan State. You get Minnesota, who I think is going to be very good. You bring back Clifford it seems like he's been the quarterback since about 2015, been around forever. And, they have some more skill kids back. But like you said, their offensive line was poor last year. Can they fix that in the season? Maybe not. Defensively, they were very good. I don't think they will be as good as they were last year. Manny Diaz will be a good D coordinator, but I just don't think they'll be as good. I think if you're going to get plus money here, just the way they performed the last 2 years, I would say take the under 8.
What was their terrible? Was it Illinois? That game they lost in overtime where nobody could score? That was my worst. I think that was my worst college loss last year.
Yeah.
That was so bad. They didn't even deserve to get to overtime that game, and I had them. All right. Iowa, 7.5, the over-under, 20-1 to win the conference. They were 10-4 last year, 4-1 to win the West side of this conference. Kirk Ferentz, 24th year. My God. It's crazy. Took his team to a Big Ten title game. They got mauled 42-3 by Michigan, but they have the second most wins. This surprised me. Second most wins of any Big Ten program over the last 4 years. Ohio State 44, Iowa 35. I think they were 6-0 before coming back down to earth. They had the best turnover differential in the Big Ten last year. That could be tricky. They were plus 12, so maybe they were a little lucky. Depends how you look at that. They lost running back Tyler Goodson. He was a stud. Charlie Jones, Tyler Linderbaum, obviously that center went high. Matt Hankins, the quarterback. The quarterback trade-off they have is Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla. They combined not good. 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Petras had 2 touchdowns and 8 turnovers and 4 losses. Padilla completed 42% of passes in 3 starts. Their defense returned 7 starters. Defensively, they were great. I mean, the only FBS team to hold opponents to under 20 points a game in each of the last six seasons. 35 of 36 opponents under 28 points. Jack Campbell led the country, 143 tackles. Riley Moss, an All-American selection. So they have some studs out there. Lucas Van Ness led all Big Ten freshmen with 7 sacks. They have to replace Hankins and Dane Belton, the safety. Here's their schedule. Iowa State, Michigan, at Ohio State, at Purdue, Wisconsin, at Minnesota. I don't love this one. It's a tough schedule. It's either 7 or 5 or 8-4. I'm going to go a little light here. I know Parlay Kid, you're going to take a chance over. I know Ferentz has a competitive squad, but I'm going to go light. I go 7-5, and that puts it under.
Well, I'm going to go over here again, Sal. I'm going to go over the 7.5 at minus 105. I think I'm getting a pretty good number here. The Big Ten West winner last year. They returned 7 starters on both sides of the ball. So a lot of depth returning. Like you said, I think what you already mentioned, I think an incredible stat, Sal, that in 35 of their last 36 games, they've held opponents under 28 points.
Yep.
In this day and age, almost unheard of.
Yep.
Like you said, linebacker Jack Campbell led the country in tackles last year. Big Ten cornerback of the year, and Riley Moss is fantastic. Sal, the beginning of the schedule should win at least 4 out of their first 5. Should be 4-0 out of the gate as long as they handle Iowa State, their rival, at home in game 2, an early game against them. 4-0 is where they should start. Basically, got to go 500 the rest of the way. And Iowa's just that type of team. They grind out wins. Their quarterback situation is not good. It's like Wisconsin. It is not good. Spencer Petras, though, I think he does have the potential. He's a big kid with a big arm. Does have a potential to greatly improve. So let's roll with the over 7.5 at minus 105 for Iowa here.
All right. I mean, this is a very difficult task, right? We're going to go over 6 teams whose over-under is 7.5, I believe. And you just got to pick which 3 are going to go over and which are going to go under, or 4 and 2 or whatever. It's almost as tough as putting together a pitchback net. If I gave you 3 days to put together a net, could you do it? No. Could you pick the over under and 7.5? I don't know. All right. Nebraska, 7.5, 22-1. So now this is interesting. Why are they 7.5? They were 3-9 last year. FanDuel has the over at -120 on 7.5. Plus 350 to win the West. What's going on? Scott Frost's 5th season. He's not responsible for one of these, but they have 5 straight losing seasons. The longest streak since in like 60 years, more. 1-8 record versus the Big Ten last year. They were 10th recruiting in the conference in 2022. The biggest loss is Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez says, can I please play a 10th year for Nebraska?
No
Can I do it?
no
Can I do it?
Right?
No. And they're like, no, you can't do it. Adrian Martinez was mentioned in Better Call Saul. I don't know if anybody watches, but they're like watching a game. And I think it's supposed to be from like 2013 or so. I don't know what it is, but Martinez is mentioned. They lose him. They lose the receiver, Samori Tar, tight end Austin Allen. They lose a bunch of names. The center, Cam Jurgens, is out. So now they have Casey Thompson, Texas transfer. There you go. Led the Big 12 passing, 24 passing touchdowns last year. He only had a 4-6 record, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions in 10 starts overall. Ramir Johnson led Nebraska running backs 495 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't know. They have a bunch of JUCO players jumping in. A defense, 22.7 points per game, were the fewest by Nebraska since 2010. So that's what keeps them alive. But they have to replace JoJo Doman, Cam Taylor-Britt, interception leader Deontay Williams. They have Luke Reimer. He had 109 tackles. They have Nick Henrich. He led Big Ten freshman with 99 tackles. They play Northwestern and Ireland in 2 weeks less. That's going to be fun. We're going to learn a lot there. Then they have Oklahoma. That's a big out-of-conference game. At Purdue, Michigan, at Iowa, Wisconsin. I'm going under. I don't like this offense at all. I don't know what I'm looking at here. Scott Frost, another guy on the hot seat. I think they're a 7-win team. I don't know how you'd say they go from 3 to 8 wins if you're taking the over. I'm going to go under. I feel like I'm taking everybody under. Harry, you're going over.
I'll tell you how over, Sal. Look, they restructured Scott Frost's contract. So he's still there. It's been kind of snake bitten. The team was last year too, but they lost 9 games. You mentioned that 9 games last year, but by an average of 6 points per game. That's it. Crazy for college football to lose that many games by just such a small margin. They did get offensive coordinator Mark Whipple from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the 3rd ranked team in scoring last year at 42 points per game. You mentioned they got quarterback in the transfer portal, Casey Thompson from Texas, Grizz's guy. They also got a very good wide receiver from LSU and Trey Palmer. The game against Northwestern, who's very down, they're predicted to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten in Ireland. So that's a neutral field game. And then they have 4 straight home games. It's time for Scott Frost to finally get some luck, get something to go right for him. Turns the team around. They go over 7.5. They get to 8 wins this year.
All right. Forget about Scott Frost. What about Scott Holmes? What do you think of Casey Thompson, Texas transfer?
I think he's really good. He performed really, really well at times. He was plagued with a hand injury last year, and I expect him to do really well.
Right. Didn't you try to grab his ass in the grocery store?
It was his wife.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right, I feel
Mrs.
better.
Thompson.
It's Mrs. Thompson. All right, Minnesota. Here we go. Another 7.5. 7.5 over under wins. The over is -130. 28-1 odds to win the conference. 5-1 odds to win the West side of this conference. They were 9-4 last year. PJ Fleck 9+ wins in 2 of the last 3 seasons. They return. I'm surprised you didn't jump on this team, Harry. They returned 4-year starting quarterback Tanner Morgan and Muhammad Ibrahim, former Big Ten running back of the year, busted up his leg last year. Over half the starters from a top 10 defense. Morgan, the quarterback at his best year, broke Minnesota's single season records for passing 3,253, 30 touchdowns. And then he's got his offensive coordinator back from 2019. Those were stats from 2019.
Yep.
Kirk Ciaracha. That's so he's happy there. Big losses. They're going to have to replace 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line. Connor Olson, Blaze Andres, and Daniel Falele. 17.3 points per game allowed last season were the fewest by Minnesota in 22 years. But they do need to replace the top 3 in pressures. They were last in the conference recruiting in 2022. I'm looking at their games at Michigan State, at Penn State, at Wisconsin. Lots of boom or bust potential. New offensive line, replace the starters at defense, and a poor recruiting class, I think leaves them at 7.5. I'm going to go under. I'm going on all the unders on the 7.5. Parlay Kid, you're taking the over.
I'm taking all the overs here, Sal. This is a 9-win team from last year, and I didn't think they played great at times last year, and they still won 9 games. 3 out of their 4 losses, Sal, by the way, were 1-possession losses too. So this number could have been higher in terms of the win total. Mo Ibrahim is back, Harry, as a running back. Yes. We know he's one of your favorites. Somebody that you used to roll with a lot. He's super talented. Tanner Morgan's 27 career wins, and you gotta like a guy that's as bald as Harry and I. This guy, he's Tanner Morgan. Just shaves his head down. He doesn't care. He's a winner. He knows how to win. His best year was 2019. You're going back 3 years, but like you said, Sal, his offensive coordinator from that year is back. If he can duplicate that season, Minnesota is going to have a great year. And they're going to be a super sleeper this year. PJ Fleck, really good coach. Really good coach. They just signed him to an extension. Great move by Minnesota. They returned 13 starters overall between the offense and defense. Their defense was the second best in the Big Ten last year. 4 out of their first 5, I think they started 4-1, and they got 2 gimmies to start the year. So I'll take the over here, 7.5. Minnesota's my team this year. This is a team I'm following pretty strongly.
All right.
I'm rooting for them big time this year.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm looking at all these 7.5. It's unbelievable how all these land on 7.5 with these good teams. So Michigan State is also 7.5. And I think this is a fishiest of line. I mean, 11-2 last year, right? Mel Tucker's third year, the biggest single season turnaround in school. I guess that's the reason. Went from 2 wins in 2020 to 11 wins in 2021. So now you have to figure out what the hell this team is doing. Like I said, 7.5 is their over under. They started the season 8-0, and I think they were like number 5 by the end of October. And then they lost 2 of the next 3 to Purdue and Ohio State. They lose Kenneth Walker III. He's a Seattle Seahawk now. Jalen Naylor is a wide receiver. They lose Connor Hayward, the tight end. They have a bunch of losses. They have a bunch of notable transfer portal ads. Jalen Berger from Wisconsin, the running back. Another running back, Jarek Broussard from Colorado. They have a tight end from Illinois out there. Defensive end from Florida, Chris Bogle. Their quarterback, Peyton Thorne, 262 yards per game, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions last season. Second most touchdowns in the Big Ten. Like I said, they added running backs Jarek Broussard from Colorado, a former Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year in 2020, and Jalen Berger from Wisconsin. Wide receiver Jaden Reed. They did well filling in here offensively. They returned 9 starters on defense. Jacob Slade, all Big Ten selection, had 40 pressures last year. Xavier Henderson tied the team with 96 tackles, along with Cal Halliday. They're at Washington week 3, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State's on the schedule. I think from 11-2 to 8 is a pretty big regression. I feel like I have nothing else other than I just keep going unders with these 7.5 teams. It just seems like they're begging you to take the over. I'm going under. I don't see the defense improving enough, actually. 7-5 is what I'm saying. Harry, you actually agree with me.
Yeah, I'm going to go under 2. They were very fortunate last year in some of these games. Probably should have lost at home to Nebraska. Should have probably lost to Penn State. Tucker got that big contract. He can relax now. You mentioned Sal, Kenny Walker with the Seahawks. He was a lot of times last year. He was the Heisman Trophy favorite. He had a tremendous year, but they got to fill that hole. You mentioned Jalen Naylor gone. Now he's with the Vikings as well. I'm going under with a 7.5 tier too. I just think it's a fishy number as well. And I'm going to go under with Spartans. I think they have, like you mentioned, that they're at Washington. That could be a tough one. And if they lose that, and then they play Penn State on the road, Michigan on the road, payback from Michigan in that game. If Michigan puts a real pounding on them, that may trigger them to really tank in the second half of the season. So I'm going to go under 7.5. I think they get to 7 and they make a bowl game, but not a great season for the Spartans this year.
I mean, I'm looking at all these 7.5s that I'm taking under. So that must mean that I think Illinois, who's expected to win 4.5, we're not going to preview these teams. Maryland expected to win 6, Indiana expected to win 4, Northwestern 4, Rutgers 4. I guess I think they're going to pull up upsets all over the damn place. One team they're not going to beat. This is my strongest pick over underwise. Purdue 7.5. The overs plus 125. You get 30-1 odds. They were 9-4, 30-1 to win the conference. They were 9-4 last year, 6-1 to win the Western side of the conference. Their 9 wins last year were the most of the Jeff Brom era and the most by Purdue in a season since 2003. Since who was quarterback, Harry?
2003.
Yeah. He's going to get it. I think he's going to get it. It's a pro. He went pro. Anybody?
Darren?
Yeah, why can't I think who it was after Breeze?
That's all right.
After Breeze.
Kyle Orton. 2003.
Yep.
So they won 9. That was the last time. They beat number 2 Iowa and
Bears
number 3 Michigan State by double digits. Quarterback Aiden O'Connell ranked second in the Big Ten completion percentage, 71.6, 309-yard passing. They had 28 passing touchdowns, only behind Ohio State's C.J. Stroud. They're going to have to replace the second leading receiver, Milton Wright. He had 7 touchdowns, 732 yards because he was ruled academically ineligible for 2022. But without Bell or Wright available in 2021, the Music City Bowl, they beat Tennessee, and Aiden O'Connell had 534 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. The defense was average. They were at 7th. They returned 8 starters. They're going to have to replace all Big Ten tight end George Karlaftis. He was a first-round pick. Branson Dean had 4.5 sacks. They're going to be all right, I think. 28 pressures last year. They opened with Penn State. There's no Ohio State. There's no Michigan. There's no Michigan State. They have Iowa at home. This is my strongest pick. I like Aiden O'Connell. I like Jeff Brom. I like Purdue over 7.5 even, Brother Bry. You like them over 7?
Yeah, well, I'll take, you know what, I'll take them over 7.5 too at plus 125. So it's funny. At first I was thinking under. I thought maybe they overachieved last year, but I will say that no team screwed me more than Purdue last year.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how many times I went against them, especially late in the season. They ended up screwing me game after game, but maybe things are finally clicking for Brom and this team. I mean, week 1's going to be huge at home against Penn State, right? It's a crucial game for them. You know, so I think if you look at their schedule out of the gate, they're probably going to be 3-1 or 4-0, right? Mm-hmm. And then that leads into a tough game into Minnesota, which is going to be tough. Maryland could be tough too, but Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa. But I think they're going to win a few of those games. You know, you said they won 9 last year, and they ended winning 5 of 6. And they had those really good wins. They beat Iowa, they won at Nebraska, Michigan State, and that Tennessee game. So, like you were saying with Aiden O'Connell, he's probably the second best quarterback in this conference. David Bell might have been a big loss for them because at times he was really good. But like you said, in that bowl game, he still performed just as well. So even though this team screwed me last year, I'm going to go over the 7.5 as well.
All right. So we're left with, I think that we know which way we're going. So Ohio State, not much fun. It's minus 215 around to win the conference, right around there. So if you like them to beat Michigan basically in the last game of the season, and you like them to take care of whoever else on the other end, Wisconsin or Iowa, whoever comes out of that side, you kind of have to pick them. And I do. I think they lose one game, and so I think they win the Big Ten. And I don't know, Brother Bry, you agree. Darren, you agree too, right? Ohio State?
Yeah. Ohio State.
Yeah. So Harry,
too loaded. Loaded.
Yeah, make your case, Harry, for Michigan one more time.
Well, I think Harbaugh wants to prove that last season wasn't a fluke.
I agree with that. I'll agree with that. I think he wants to prove last season wasn't a fluke.
Listen, you mentioned Ohio State, Garrett Wilson gone, Olave gone. You mentioned the secondary is a little soft, Sal. They lost their best cornerback in Bryson Shaw, transferred to USC. Michigan still has plenty of weapons on offense.
Michigan lost the best player in the draft. I don't know. I don't know.
Sure. But I still think on offense, they have plenty of weapons, a quarterback to back. Corum, I think, will do a great job. And I think they win in the horseshoe and they get it done and they take down Ohio State again.
All right. So you get good odds for that, right? At least, did we say 6 to 1?
6 to 1?
Yeah, I think it is. So that's that. All right. Did we do it, guys? Did we just go over 18 teams?
Banged it out.
Full thorough analysis.
Pretty impressive.
I'm
Not bad.
actually
Not bad.
able to pronounce names that I read 6 hours ago for the first time. It's very exciting. All right. We are going to do it all again tomorrow, whether you like it or not. We're teasing the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. We won't do 9 for each conference. We'll probably do 4 or 5 from each conference and leave it at that. But it's been fun, and I have a headache. And so I think we should stop. And that'll do it for another episode of Against All Odds. For Spaghetti, for Meatballs, for Babyface Joel Solomon, for Scott the Grizz Holmes, and the Degenerate Trifecta, I'm Sal saying so long and happy handicapping.